Step back Schult here, and step back Albedo. A new best girl is in town, and she's ready to self-induce kidney stones to everyone that she comes in contact with. But okay, all jokes aside, in all honesty, that moment, if you were in that situation, death would be a kindness. Like, I think that's probably one of the worst things that could probably happen to you in this universe of Overlord, besides probably continuously coming back over and over, or just, being pushed to the point of death, and then, revived or healed up to full, and then continuously, tortured. I guess that would be a lot worse, but in reality, that's kind of what is happening to this man. This man is going to go through so much suffering. Honestly, I just feel bad for the man. I mean, granted, they're all greedy. They're all jerks. I mean, there's only a certain few that are relatively okay people, but in reality, most of them are all in it for the money, their own personal greed, and they're the ones that pretty much, have caused this. They walked in to their own grave. They had many chances to back out and, leave, but obviously they didn't. But just still, that moment, though, when you're in that type of situation, oh my god. When you think about it, honestly, that dude didn't deserve it as much as probably this individual that had the slaves, which were, the elf slaves. Which, let's get into that segment for a second. So, I don't know how many of you noticed this. It was very apparent that, those individuals, the three girls, they were pretty much enslaved by the dude. But, I don't know if you noticed this, but when it comes to their character designs, their ears were clipped. Like, they looked like they were regular humans, but their ears were clipped. And as you know, elves, their signature feature that you would know from any elf, you don't even need to be a fan of fantasy or anything, but elves, they always have, like, pointed ears. They're either tall, they're good with bows, and they have pointed ears. And in this case, you can see that the dude has clipped their ears to, rid them of elven-type features, which is just pretty freaking messed up. So the dude, the individual, is just straight up a certified scumbag, and it makes sense why those three girls just started, I guess mourning his death, mourning him when he finally dropped to the ground. But yeah, when you really think about that man, he got off lucky. Like, when you compare his death from Hamsuke to the dude that was being, loved by Neuronist, you can see a big difference there, okay? You can definitely see how the man got off lucky. Like, seriously, it may have been painful probably having the arms gone and all that, but he got off lucky at the end of the day. Out of everyone else that's probably just suffering, which there's so much I need to talk about, there's so much I need to dive into and analyze and discuss to you anime-onlys, because there's so many things that kind of was cut with this episode, but it still kept the core theme of what was going on in this moment in the light novel, which makes this for a very enjoyable episode. It's a very quick-paced, and it really just gets the point across of how horrific the Great Tomb of Nazarick really is. Now, I do want to just be point-blank with all of you, that there was a lot of moments throughout this, like, the different, areas of the first part of Nazarick that the, workers entered, that actually were on easy mode, set easy mode. See, Ainz, he wanted them to come in, okay? Like, he gave them an option, obviously, not to come in many times, which I'll get into that later in this video, but he gave them many choices to just not be in there to, save their lives, but, greed got to them, and Ainz didn't just want to wipe out the entire party like that. He didn't want to completely eradicate them in less than a second. He wanted them to test Nazarick's defenses, but also get in a little bit deep just to see how certain things are done, how certain soldiers or, free mob spawns that are part of the Great Tomb of Nazarick can actually handle invaders that you would normally see. In this case, when you look at all the workers that were going into the place, they're around the average level of maybe 15 to 25, maybe reaching almost a level 30, but none of them are too ridiculous in level. I mean, when you compare to stuff like Ainz and the Guardians and stuff, these individuals, they're nothing compared to the NPCs that we've seen time and time again throughout, Overlord. So Ainz, he knew for a fact in terms of their battle strength, coming in when they were walking into the Great Tomb, that they really couldn't do anything. They were all going to die. Even if they managed to somehow get in a little bit deep, they're all going to die. And there were so many traps that could insta-kill them that, honestly, they're not going to make it that far. So obviously, Ainz, he turned off a bunch of the traps. He didn't want to use a bunch of the traps that are a part of Nazarick, because honestly, let me just be point blank with you, he actually didn't want to waste the gold from the old world. As you know, Ainz has a limited amount of gold in his vault that comes from the game of the series, you know, where he came from. And in that game, remember, he has in the vault where Pandora's Actor is, there's a limited amount of gold, he can use it for revives or certain resources to use in the Great Tomb of Nazarick, and as you know, Ainz, he's a penny pincher. He's a little bit greedy, okay? We know how he is when it comes to magical items, to experiments, all that type of stuff. He's a little bit of a greedy man. And so, in this case, he didn't want to use the money just to, you know, wipe out, like, weak people that can't even deal with, you know, free mob spawns that come with the tomb. That's the funny part about this entire ordeal, is that he didn't even need to use the defenses that he used when he was going up against, you know, 1,500 raiders that attacked the Great Tomb of Nazarick a long time ago in the past, which was, I think that was actually revealed earlier on in Season 1. I believe it was a long time ago. Many of you might have forgotten about that detail, but there was a long time ago to where the Great Tomb of Nazarick, when it was still a game, that over 1,500 people tried to raid Nazarick, and they all got wiped out. Like, they all legit got wiped out. So, when you compare people that are like max level that got wiped out to level 20s and 25s, or, you know, maybe almost level 30, they can't do much at all. But okay, let's say this was a game, okay? Let's be real here. You probably would have made a lot of mistakes in this situation. You would probably done the exact same mistakes as the individuals that went into the Great Tomb of Nazarick, okay? See, when we're playing games, well, I know this is technically real life to them, but when we're playing games, or even as humans, honestly, we're like this, and, you know, what they were doing throughout this episode is honestly how humans would be, just how we normally would act. But when you're playing a game, obviously, when you're going into a dungeon or something, obviously, it could be a little bit harder than your required level. But if you walk in and you see a bunch of treasure and all that, you're gonna be like, whoa, all this money and all that. You're gonna be grabbing it, putting it in your bag and all your limited amount of space, and you're like, okay, so I got all this money, I can go back and make a fortune and all that, but I could go a little bit deeper. I could go deeper into this tomb to see what I could find, see if I could find anything that could be even better than this, because, I mean, if I just walking in through the door and noticing stuff like this, then I've hit a gold mine. I can't imagine what's, you know, left there all around if I go deeper and deeper into the tomb. So in that moment, you know as a gamer, you get a little bit suspicious. You would want to see what's a little bit deeper. So you might test out the first floor of the dungeon just to see what's going on. You go down and you see these like free mob skeleton spawns running at you and all that like crazy, and that's why all of them laughed. When all of those workers started laughing was because they're like, wait a minute, we got all of this gold and we're going up against, you know, foes that are just like these weak little skeletons, some of the weakest creatures in the world. So obviously if you saw something like that, your guard would, you know, diminish. You would drop, and you just, you know, you would want to keep going forward. You'd think, okay, so if this is what's meeting us after all of that gold, then there must not be that crazy of an enemy deeper in this tomb, or maybe there isn't no leader in this tomb, and we could just have free reign throughout the entirety of it. So, if you're a gamer, and you're in that situation, you'd probably think that too, honestly. But, at the same time, it also would be very suspicious to see that much gold at the start. It would definitely be something to be wary about, which, like I said, I'll get into later on in this video. So, yeah, their greed is what caused them. Like, they pretty much fell for a tactic that I think any gamer would do. You would want to get a little bit further and further, push the limits just to see what you can get away with, and obviously that's what they did, and they paid the price. They died. Now, I want to say the highlight of this episode, one of the best moments, was seeing the maids talking about the individuals that were trying to fight free mobs. That was probably some of the funniest things I've ever seen from the anime, but one of the funniest moments of the light novel as well. I mean, I remember in the light novel reading that segment where the maids were, you know, kind of giving commentary over the individuals fighting the skeletons. They were pretty much making fun of them. Like, these little, you know, weaklings, they can't even beat free mob skeletons. Like, these free skeletons that spawn, they can't even beat them. And they're just sitting there like, oh, this is bad. You know, it was just so funny because in the light novel, the maids were just straight out mocking them, which they did do in the anime, but in the light novel, they were mocking them, and you really didn't even get to see the action. You just heard, like, you know, a description of it from the maids, which you're like, oh, man, they're just so irrelevant that we're just getting a parody description from the maids, and that's what made it so funny. It's definitely a highlight of the episode personally for me, just seeing how savage that is, because, I mean, these guys, they're like the best of the best, honestly, they're like workers, the best of the workers, can't even do nothing against the fresh spawn, so imagine how the high tier guardians and stuff are. You're not gonna be able to do anything. It's like, it's GG. So yeah, that's the funny thing about this, and that was probably, like I said, my favorite moment. Now, another great moment is definitely seeing the Cockroach King pop up. Now, that is honestly a very creepy moment, because, let's be real, cockroaches scare the crap out of a lot of people, even though they're not, like, complete, quote-unquote, deadly like some insects. I mean, they're just nasty, gross, because of what, you know, cockroaches live on or live off of and stuff. They can be pretty nasty. But even then, though, just the way they look and, you know, the stigma that cockroaches have gotten over the years, it's horrifying to see something like that. And so when you see this, like, giant cockroach pop up that's like royalty, like a king and all that, and then just looking at you, he's like, thank you for, you know, delivering me your meat and all that, for we can eat you, for my children, my family, they can stop, you know, cannibalizing each other, and they can have something new. I'm just like, oh god. Like, I remember reading this in the light novel, and I was just like, this is probably one of the worst ways to potentially go, until you see Neuronist and what, you know, that poor individual had to go up against. But anyways, this is probably the second worst death, because there is some details that wasn't clarified that I want you anime-onlys to be aware of. So, you know how at the end of that little segment, he's like, I guess we'll have second helpings? That's what he says? Well, what that meant is that he was going to bring their health bar back up pretty much to max and start over again and devour them, allowing his children to devour them. So they're technically in an endless cycle of almost dying and being brought back, and then almost dying, being brought back, until literally their innards no longer exist. That's pretty much what has happened to them. And so yeah, that little detail was cut out from this episode, which I think probably was because of censorship reasons, but they're pretty much an endless supply of food for the cockroaches. That's unnerving. Very, very unnerving. But in reality, though, I do want to say that the Cockroach King, he actually is a pretty chill guy. Like, he's really chill. Deep down, the man is chill. He's not that bad of a dude, even though I guess they wound up being in a bad spot. He's not really that bad of a guy, honestly, in terms of, like, all the other NPCs that is a part of Nazarick. He's one of the chillest, I would say, amongst the entire group. Let's also talk about the situation with the elves and what's going to happen with them, because I know many are going to be questioning that after, you know, the scumbag that died, what's going to happen to the elves, because technically everyone is dying. What's going to happen to them? Well, this is not necessarily revealed in this episode, which it should have, so I'm going to assume they're probably going to skip this detail, unless it's said in the next episode. I don't really know, but it's not really that big of a spoiler, so don't worry. I'm just going to say it because, I mean, you know, I don't know. There is content that is cut continuously throughout the Overlord anime. So, the elves, the elf girls, they were forced to be there. And remember what Ainz said in the last episode? He's like, so, none of you are being forced. You're not adventurers, you're not tasked with doing this job and coming here. You're not being forced at all. So, what's the reason why you're wanting to come to this tomb? And they said pretty much greed. They wanted money. So, that's why Ainz like, oh, such a worthless question. So, he knows that these individuals, these girls, they were not willingly going there. They were forced to go there by this greedy man. And so, he forgives the elves, and he actually puts them under the care of Aura, you know, the dark elf. So, yeah, that's what happens to those elves, and they now serve her on her floor, and that's where they live their days. So, they're having a pretty good life, honestly. They're not being killed or anything. They're having a really good life. So there you go. There's the clarification of that. Now, to describe or explain the design of the lizardmen, why they had, like, those collars on, that actually wasn't explained as well. The collars that the lizardmen were wearing was an EXP boost item, which boosts the EXP you gain while training, fighting, whatever. I mean, if you played RPGs, you know what that is. Like, you know there's certain items, like Pokemon, you have, like, an EXP share you put on your Pokemon, your entire party gets, you know, EXP. That's what that was. Basically, them donning that collar type thing allows their EXP to rise exponentially, a lot faster than normal, and they're leveling up, and they're able to get a lot stronger than they once were. So yeah, that's what that collar represents. It's not like something to do with slavery or anything like that. It was just legit just raising their XP. It just has a very weird design. Now, let's see. Other things I need to clarify. I guess let's talk about the maids, too. I know I said it's one of my favorite segments, but there's another scene I need to talk about when it comes to the maids, like within that moment. And that is, since all those individuals, you know, they died, obviously, or some of them that survived, they got sent to Neuronist, the individuals, if they would have ran, like if they would have tried to flee away around the corner, they would have been ambushed by a big army. So, yeah. They had no chance. Even if they tried to flee, they were going to die. And it was a lot worse if they tried to flee. So them standing their ground, I guess in a way they made it a lot quicker on themselves, but it would have been a lot worse if they would have tried to flee, because like I said, army just sitting around the corner. Let's see, any other things I need to talk about before I get into like individual stuff of what Ainz was doing? I don't think so. Okay, so let's talk about cut content. Now, there is one scene, honestly, as a light novel reader, I'm a little bit upset with. Now, it's nothing too big, like nothing that destroys the episode, nothing that, you know, ruins Overlord, but just as someone that, you know, was a fan of the light novel and someone that was really looking forward to a certain scene, it wasn't animated. And that scene, honestly, you might not care about if you're an anime only, because obviously you haven't read the light novel, so you really won't understand the reasoning to why I care so much about it. But there's a scene where when they're entering into the tomb, you know, the guy that kind of looks like Dwarf, and, you know, he's acting like a great leader and stuff, but he's putting on like a show, you know, he talked about that like that in this episode. Well, when they enter the part of the tomb, then when they get a little bit deeper, there's a segment to where they encounter an Elder Lich, and it's just one single Elder Lich, and, you know, he's just, you know, it's like, oh, this must be the master of this tomb. That's what they say, which, when you know how the tomb is, that's hilarious, because an Elder Lich leading the tomb, that's... yeah, that's funny, because the Elder Liches are nowhere near any of the Guardians, Floor Guardians, or anything like that. So, when they're like, this must be the master of the tomb, it really made you start smiling. But when they finally managed to fight the Lich, all of a sudden, multiple Liches pop up at once. They're like, oh. And they get scared and they start running, which explains that scene when you see the dude running from the multiple Elder Liches and all that. That was that. They just didn't clarify what happened there in this episode, and I wish they would have, because it would have added a little bit more build-up to Ainz popping up at the end of the episode. So let's get into that. So, it's very apparent that pretty much the entire new cast of characters that were introduced to workers, they're gone. They're gone. They're not coming back, unless some of them are obviously being terrorized permanently. And in this case, the group of characters that are left standing are actually the ones that got the most character development in the last episode. Archie, for one, you know, is doing everything for her sisters. Even though it's kind of greedy, she is trying to do it for her family and get her family in a better situation. And so there is a lot of emotional weight going on right here, because, like, even though Ainz is in the right for what he is doing, because, I mean, he's just protecting his home, okay? At the end of the day, Ainz literally gave them many chances to back away. But they didn't. I mean, the whole gold situation at the beginning of the tomb was also Ainz's last chance for them, like, giving them the last chance to back away. But they didn't, obviously. So, they asked for it. So, Ainz, even though what he is doing is cruel, messed up, he did give them many chances. So, they're responsible for all of this. But at the same time, he obviously doesn't understand all of the circumstances of these characters, especially Archie's group and what they're trying to fight for. And so, it makes this moment very personal, because is Ainz going to do something to characters that you actually might care about and want them to live on? That is the question that pops up while watching that ending segment. And also on top of that, when he walks through the door, that's pretty jarring, because you have Aura pop down, you see just the impact of the landing, showing the strength, and it's like, okay, we have these workers, these no-name scrubs coming in and all that, versus the supreme being, the god of this tomb, Ainz, and you see Ainz walk through the door, which is scary, because, like I said, they're level 20s, and Ainz is like, he's max, okay? And he also has cash shop items. He's a broken boy, okay? He's a really broken boy. You're not gonna be able to, you know, fight up against something like that, because if this is like a normal RPG, if something's over 10 levels on you, it's over. You're not doing much. Like, look, I play a lot of World of Warcraft, and something's over 10 levels, unless you have a party, you're not gonna defeat that by yourself. Usually, it's almost impossible. So, yeah, Ainz being that strong, it's just like insects before him. And, oh man, it's probably going to be an amazing episode. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they handle the next episode of Overlord. I'm pretty excited as a light novel reader. But okay, I think that's pretty much about it. It's a great episode. There is some cut content, like I said, but it's still an enjoyable episode, and I'm looking forward to seeing how certain events are handled. If there is any major thing that I have missed from this episode and I did not talk about, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to talk about it maybe either in a separate video or in the next episode review if it really is that dire. Like I said, let me know in the comments below. And with that, I love you guys. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Stay healthy, stay safe. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.